Okay, this is my 2023 spring semester fire legal and political science video. We're going to be talking about mental health and the legal aspects of it. So I am here with Assistant Chief Ethan Ross. I'm going to get his 2 cents and input and expert opinion on a lot of stuff.
Perfect.
If you'd like to just give us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Assistant Chief Ethan Ross with the Monroe Falls Fire Department, and I've been in the fire service for 22 years now.
He doesn't look it. All right. So, we're obviously talking about mental health. We discussed it a little bit before this. Why do you think it's important for us as firefighters to have good habits in mental health?
I think mental health is important for everybody, especially living through what we're living through right now, but more so for our first responders and probably mostly our firefighters and paramedics. We deal with a lot on a normal day. We deal with a lot with our home lives. And you can't come to work and do your job appropriately if you are suffering in any way. We need you to be at the top of your game.
I agree. So on that, being on top of your game, being healthy, mentally healthy, for us here, we are a part-time department right now. Resources are somewhat limited for us, I guess, to an extent, but we do have some options available for some of the guys should they need them, right?
Absolutely. So a lot of things are limited, and that is the culture we live in. It is getting better. I think the fire service is in a transition of where we were at one time way too tough to even believe that mental health would be an issue in our organizations. Mm-hmm. Over the last 10 years, I think a lot of companies, employers, cities have realized that there's a mental health issues. Counties have created teams. We have one here in Summit County that's made up of clergy as well as fire and police personnel that'll do some counseling, they'll talk to you, which may be even just the most important part, just having that conversation.
Right. There's
employee assistance plans that are available here. If you ask for help, again, you have to kind of ask for it. No one's going to really hold your hand for that. Some of the associations, so the Summit County Fire Chiefs Association and Summit County Firefighters Association do have some resources available. But ultimately, I think we need to help each other also on that.
Yeah, I agree. Just like what you said with the type A personalities, we're all tough guys. We want to put on that front. Nothing bothers us, and then, people go home and, we've all seen what happens there. But it's difficult because you want to have that balance of, that tough bravado, I guess, because that's what we do. We're firemen.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, you have to be realistic with yourself because you're not doing anybody any favors. So as far as asking for help, say we get a bad call or something like that, I know there's some places that just kind of assume that, hey, that may have been a questionable call. We should bring a CISD team. Is that something we would regularly practice, or would you wait for a request, or what do you think would be a better option?
On the ultimate bad calls, the ones that we all think of that are truly tragic, the bus full of kids that explodes, we're going to bring in those resources automatically. In a lot of ways, you don't have a choice. That is just what is going to happen.
Right.
But more importantly, it's the smaller incidents that may not affect 2/3 of the group. It may only affect 1/3 of it, or it may affect one person, and you just don't know. And it's important to know your men and women, your firefighters, of what they deal with normally. And if you have a child that has a certain ailment and then you're on a call that a kid died from that ailment, you should be able to realize that may affect them and you may need to get them help right away.
Right.
And I think the family unit of the fire station is we do look out for each other, we do talk to each other, and generally almost all calls end up back at the kitchen table anyway. And hopefully at that point, you're actually listening to each other.
Sure.
And you maybe see some of those red flags that pop up.
Yeah. So on that topic, we obviously got to factor some legal stuff in here. talked about it a little bit beforehand, but do you have an obligation that you have to like pass on anything if somebody comes to you with some sort of suicidal or homicidal ideations, or I don't know, really anything that you consider questionable? You know,
As an employer, we do have the legal obligations. As any employer that has personnel, you have the legal obligation to make sure that you get them the help they need. If they come into your office and say certain key words, you do have the legal obligation.
mm-hmm.
I'm not sure those factors come out as much as they should in the fire service. Again, we kind of tend to bury stuff deep, and it may just be very small fragments of those red flags, and it may take a long time to have those come out.
Right.
But if somebody comes and says, you know, I'm thinking about killing myself and my family, and you choose to close your door and say, get out of here, I'm not bothering with that today. Yeah, you definitely breached your obligation.
Mm-hmm.
And as healthcare providers, as paramedics, you also have that. And you do have to look at your guys and the people in the firehouse, kind of like that patient aspect. If you would think it was questionable in the field that somebody said something,
sure.
and then you hear one of your firefighters say it also,
mm-hmm.
I think it's the same legality there.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think if you didn't do anything, there would be any liability on your part, either in an official or unofficial concept?
I think you have the liability, but I think almost more than the liability, you're going to have to go to bed that night knowing that you could have helped somebody and chose not to. And
Right.
hopefully it's somebody you actually care about quite a bit. You know, we care about each other like a family.
Right.
And I think you would have a hard time, and you would need a lot of help on your own after that as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a tough call. Like you said, I don't know what would be worse, either, you know, getting the legal consequences, if you will, or just having to live with something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It would definitely be tough. So we kind of briefly touched on before we started the video about line of duty deaths and how they're now considering suicides as part of this. As far as getting documentation that somebody may or may not have been on calls, or has, I guess, even seeked treatment or come to you with an issue. Just can you give me a brief rundown of how that would operate?
I think this job is very stressful. I think we as firefighters pretend it's not. And a lot of the times we hide a lot of that. It's an obligation as far as if somebody is in line of duty death, they should have that benefit. That benefit's there for a reason. Mm-hmm. And physically we see when somebody's hurting. Mentally we can't see it sometimes. And we definitely have that obligation that we need to look through those calls. We need to document that thing. We need to keep journals. We need to, when we see something escalate, we need to have those available.
Right.
Luckily, with a lot of the reporting software we're doing now, line of duty deaths are a little easier to sort on. You're able to sort calls. You're able to sort on different areas, so you can bring those up. It's not a file box that where somebody has to go through each file to try to figure out what run this person could have had a stressor.
Sure.
You can almost gather all the calls that individual has went on, mm-hmm. and then go through just that person's calls.
Yeah.
And it may not be up to you to decide what's stressful. You know, you may have to compile a very large stack
right.
of these and give them to somebody on the outside to look through to try to determine that.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like you said, your HIPAA kind of goes away after your death, so they can come in and request this type of documentation, which is readily available.
In the last team, which goes into a lot of line of duty deaths, they're always available, which is a huge thing for the fire service, and they will walk you through a lot of that paperwork. Mm-hmm. And I think if an officer would call them and say, hey, can you come in here, sit down with me, and describe what I should be looking for if you don't know,
right. I
think they would gladly sit down with you. And they deal with a lot of line of duty deaths and would be able to at least point you in those directions.
Yeah. Yeah, I think something we got to, consider at some point in time is how, like, that line of duty death and, say, the law office for the cities is going to be interacting with each other and things like that. Because, obviously if we've got a fire death and things, there's lawsuits related outside of that to maybe a homeowner or if it was an arson fire. So, you know how it is nowadays, the legal system is pretty sue happy.
Absolutely.
So, I think that's something maybe we, as a fire service, might have to be somewhat concerned about, where maybe the family would come back on a city or a department and say, well, he went on these calls, it was documented, and You did nothing to do that, but now you have to prove that not only was he there, but he didn't say anything to you about, like, I'm feeling some kind of way, or that call really bothered me, or if he did and you just kind of brushed it off because the guy is known to be, a little sarcastic about things. So, I don't know what the answer is there, but it's like, I don't know, it kind of makes me nervous, let me put it that way.
That is some interesting points, Mario. You're absolutely right.
I don't want to see somebody who put a good career in the fire service, their name tarnished because their family thinks it was something we could have done. I mean, none of us, like you said, we don't want to see that happen to each other. So it's hard, and I think that's kind of part of the reason too that we want to bring our families in, get to know each other. Everybody knows each other, so we understand that better. But at the same time, I mean, there's all types of people out there, so you never know what can happen.
We as a profession do need to do a better job of keeping care of our own. We do need to have those hard conversations. We do need our families to be together and to be able to enjoy one another's company, and then you have that shoulder to lean on in those events.
Yeah, I'd like to see more of that, I know occasionally we get some get-togethers here, and your family pops in and out
Sure.
and everything, and that's a good thing, but not every place does that, and I think that kind of builds that sort of trust with everybody that knows that we're going to be doing everything we can to take care of each other.
In the departments that do those things, and I'm going to go back to kind of almost the volunteer departments where the families are intermingled, and that is what they do for social as well. When you get into the more career and the paid thing, you don't want to spend more time there than you already are. You're spending a ton of time there. You kind of need a break from these people, but ultimately is that a disservice for your mental health?
Right, yeah. I agree, and it's like you said, it's hard because you're there so much. But when you factor in, you have vacation time and Kelly days and all that stuff, is it really enough time off? They say we work 100 days a year, but we're working 24 hours a time during those 100 days. So is that really enough time off to get that mental break and then be willing to come back with your brother and sister firefighters and have those kind of interactions or meet them somewhere, outside of work?
That is another benefit of this is a part-time job for you, and most of our people. And when you guys come here from your full-time jobs, this is almost a place you can decompress.
It is.
You can talk and complain about different things to people that don't have an iron in the fire, and they're able to actually support you in that battle.
Yeah. Whether they actually agree with you or not, they're always cheering you on, like, yeah, they're wrong, you're right, and it's kind of a good place to.
So this almost helps mental health.
Yeah. We're getting paid to help our mental health here. All right, so I think we've covered a lot of good topics, and it is difficult, I think, these two concepts to somewhat put together. Your mental health and the legal aspects, just because there is so much confidentiality between the two. And there is obviously ways to get around that, with lawsuits, or I don't know, I'm sure you could get warrants and things like that to get documentation from people. But I think we kind of covered the bases of it at least. Obviously the fire service is evolving. I've seen things where stations are being built with mental health in mind, where they have completely separate dorm rooms that have your bedroom and bathroom all compartmentalized into one. It's a twofold thing. Like when you start getting some women in your department, things like that, you need privacy, but it also helps with mental health, where you can kind of go decompress and isolate. Where they have bigger common areas, that goes back to what you're talking about, where guys can get together and actually hang out. So we're getting there. It's a slow process.
Absolutely is.
But I think, as unfortunate as it is, that we have to get to this point, much like the cancer thing, that we're seeing suicides being called job-related. That's a big step for us. So we just got to get through all the bureaucracy of it, and kind of, we also got to kind of understand that it's all right to feel some kind of way sometimes.
It absolutely is. But you need to take your mental health seriously, and you need to get the help you need. And there are programs out there, and it sadly is a little bit of work to get to them sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. But in the end, it's worth it, and we all got to look out for each other.
Absolutely.
So, I appreciate you sitting down with me and talking about this stuff.
Absolutely.
So, that will be all.